Hi, I'm Nina and I work as a type designer in Austria. Today I will talk about glyph and character sets and we'll cover the why, what and how together with some examples from foundries. Let's dive into it. All set about characters, glyphs and which set to include in your font. First, the why. Why is it important to carefully plan your glyph set? There are many reasons for this, one of which is time is money. Type design is a tedious task, so it is crucial to carefully plan what you want to spend your time on and whether it will pay off. Another thing is that projects grow very fast. As soon as you add another master to your project, you basically multiply the glyph count. And drawing is not the only thing you do. Every glyph needs to be proofed, spaced, kerned, and sometimes also hinted. You have to make sure that you don't miss anything important. And you also want to avoid drawing glyphs that are never used. But an extended glyph set might be your USP. Some foundries made it their specialty to design for languages that are rarely supported. And you can take a stance by designing for underrepresented groups, to, for instance, enable them to use their native script. Let's talk about some terminology first, before we dive deeper into this. Because there are some terms that are often used interchangeably, even though they don't mean the same. The difference between character and the glyph is crucial here. A character is the smallest semantic unit of language. For instance, in this example, the lowercase a. They usually also have a Unicode. The glyph, on the other hand, is only a representation of a character. Like we see in this example, here we have a double story A and a single story A, but they both represent the character A. The glyphs usually don't have a Unicode. This example also shows this quite well. The character A is here represented by 4 different glyph designs in order to achieve a naturally handwritten look. Or one glyph can also represent multiple characters, like it is common with ligatures. Now we take this one step further to the different kinds of sets. The character is the smallest semantic unit, so the character set is a collection of these units, meaning it only includes Unicode code points. While the glyph set also includes all the glyphs. Like in this example, there are all the different versions of each character. You could also say that the glyph set is the product of the character set with applied OpenType features, which is also why the glyph set is usually larger or the same size as the character set. Let's talk about standards next. What is expected and is there a standard? Well, there is no overall standard. But some companies have published their guidelines and internal standards, which you can use to make your own glyph set. I will shortly talk about the Adobe Latin character set, the Google Fonts 2016 glyph sets, and Latin Plus by Underwear. First, the Adobe Latin character set. As the name already suggests, it's a character set and only deals with characters. It does not propose any kind of features yet. It consists of Adobe Latin 1 to Adobe Latin 5 and is a consecutive model. Let's take a closer look at each part of this system. It starts with Adobe Latin 1, which is a rather small character set and only supports Western European languages. The full European language support is only added in Adobe Latin 3. Adobe Latin 4 adds some African, Asian and American languages, while the Adobe Latin 5 mostly adds glyphs for transliteration and phonetic use. I think one major drawback of the Adobe character set is that the full European language support only comes with Adobe Latin 3, which is relatively late in the system. Next, the Google Fonts glyph sets. This already proposes some OpenType features with each step. It also is a consecutive model with 4 parts and some optional additions. The core set is similar to Adobe Latin 1. It's rather small and only has a basic Latin set for Western Europe. But with the Plus, it already adds a lot of languages, like Central and Eastern European and also Vietnamese. Then the Pro mostly adds typographic features, like inferiors, superiors, and some spacing modifiers. While the Expert is intended for text and workhorse families, to cover all typographic needs basically. Next comes Latin Plus by Underwear, which is Underwear's core glyph set. Looking at it, we can easily see that it's much smaller than the other two systems. This is because they are not trying to cover all Latin-based languages. Based on a lot of research, they designed it specifically to cover the largest number of languages with the least number of characters. They even made this interactive web tool where you can hover over a character and it tells you which languages it is used in and how many speakers there are. I find this tool quite helpful because it tells you a lot more about how and where these characters are used. All these sets are quite helpful, but they do not yet tell you what exactly you need in your glyph set. So here's my advice on how to design your glyph set. There are 3 important things to consider when determining your glyph set. First of all, the design. How do you envision your typeface to look and function? Next, the intended use. Which medium is it going to be used in? Like, is it going to be used on a poster or on a website? And, of course, the target group, which defines the languages and scripts, but also the features you need. Here are some examples of what I mean. First of all, the design. A humanist italic design, like this one, for instance, might profit from some swatch capitals to enrich the typographic possibilities, and it also matches the overall design. Contextual alternates can give a natural texture to typefaces where blunt repetition would be weird, like in this example, or maybe with handwritten or distressed typefaces. A typeface like this one, on the other hand, does not even need common things like ligatures, but the designer decided to add extra glyphs to elongate the serif-like structures. I think this is quite inventive. The intended use also plays an important role when determining the glyph set. Typefaces for large amounts of text can benefit from having small caps or old-style figures, for example. But you might want to include some special ligatures for coding typefaces, or maybe box drawing characters can be useful for typefaces that are intended to be used in the terminal. On the other hand, it is rather unlikely that display typefaces that are usually used for headlines need to include symbols for higher mathematics. Next comes the target audience, which does not only affect your character set, but also your glyph set. If you design, for instance, for a Polish audience, you might want to include an alternative version of the acute. Like we see here in this example, the Greszka usually looks a little different. A typeface for a big financial company, on the other hand, might need some more kinds of figures or currency signs to cover their needs. And if the typeface is intended to serve historians, it should maybe also include some characters that are usually not used anymore, like in this example, the long S. My personal approach is to first define the absolute minimum, meaning the characters you need regardless of the design or all the other parts. Then you take a look at the 3 factors we've just talked about: design, use, and target group. And then of course you try out and test your typeface. Is there anything missing, or is there something you never use in your examples? I have to add that these 3 parts do not necessarily have to come after each other, but testing and trying out your typefaces in some of your graphic design, for instance, should be part of the whole design process and do not necessarily come at the very end. I, for instance, am just stress testing some of my own typefaces in this presentation. It's also possible to make something like a rolling release of your typeface on future fonts or with TypeWorld. This way you can progressively extend the glyph set while already earning some money and learning from real in-use examples. I haven't done this myself yet, but I think it's a pretty good idea. Next, I also want to address some common mistakes, or at least I made them often, and maybe you want to avoid this. Don't make the mistake to add a lot of stylistic sets just because you cannot decide which glyph looks the best. In the end, you have a lot of work and most of the time it doesn't really pay off. Features are rarely used unless it's a feature that is on by default. So if you hide something behind an OpenType feature, it will probably stay undiscovered by most people. And of course, nationality is not language. You notice that you have no customers from Germany or Austria. That does not mean that none of your customers will need German-specific characters like the S set. That also goes for other languages, of course. I looked a bit around and noticed that there are significant differences between the glyph sets that different foundries offer. Therefore, I asked them for their approaches. I have to add that this is no representative research or anything, but just a few people I asked because I noticed their glyph sets are different from most others. First, I want to talk about Fontvac, which is a German type foundry. I noticed that their glyph sets are, in my opinion, exceptionally large. All their typefaces cover a wide variety of typographic features, including all kinds of figures, arrows, and currency signs. This is because their goal is to provide their customers with all typographic subtleties, which is why they pack their fonts with a lot of OpenType features. A lot of Fontvac's customers also come from the business and corporate field, and in, for example, annual reports, they often need currency signs and tabular figures and the like. So it actually makes a lot of sense that Fontvac's glyph sets are rather large. Onotype, an American type foundry run by James Edmondson, on the other hand, follows a completely different strategy. They have a rather small glyph set, which varies strongly between typefaces. James tries to provide all that is needed with the smallest possible glyph set. He adapts the glyph set very specifically to the typeface at hand. Compadre, for instance, does not even need a lowercase, because the concept is for it to work well in emblem-like environments. And it is also often paired with other typefaces. Most of the typefaces that Ono offers are display typefaces, and they, in most cases, don't need as many features, which is also why the glyph set is rather small. But he told me that he also likes to think about how he wants to advertise a specific typeface, which is why he also adds playful features, just because it's a lot of fun to him and he knows that this will stick out compared to other foundries. Libefonts is a Berlin-based type foundry which is specialized in handwritten typefaces. Because of this focus on scripty and handmade-looking typefaces, Libefonts also uses a very specialized glyph set. Ulrike told me that she also adopts the glyph set according to the design. The more decorative a design is, the fewer mathematical symbols are added, or the more handwritten it is, the more alternates are added. To achieve the natural texture of the script typeface, she usually adds about 3 to 5 different alternates per character. Vowels usually get more alternated glyphs because they occur more often. Their typefaces also often offer ligatures, which connect like in a natural handwriting, and offer some typographic specialities, like for instance, less curly uppercase letters so they can be set in all caps. Depending on the design, there are also often things like catchwords, ink blobs, or features for underlining and striking through to enable the user to create a more handmade design. I also asked all of these foundries whether they have ever received requests for additional characters or glyphs, and it turns out that none of them did. But sometimes people ask for alternative designs for specific characters. Now to summarize all this. Type design is tedious, and while most of us love drawing letters, it is also good to think about what you want to spend your time with and what really pays off, especially if you want to make a living with it. Also, there is no one solution, it always depends. You can either go with the smallest possible glyph set, or you can feel free to add options if you think it enriches your design. I want to thank all the people who were so kind to patiently answer all my questions. Ivo Gabrowicz of Fontvac, James Edmondson of ONotype, and Ulrike Rausch of Liebefonts. A big thank you also goes to my generous colleagues for letting me use their typefaces as examples. And of course, thank you to all the gorgeous people of Type Weekend for making all this possible. The slides of this presentation and all resources are also available for download on my website at nina-b.at/orset. I hope this presentation was somewhat useful or interesting for you. There are some aspects that I couldn't cover properly, like for instance how to balance production time and language coverage, and what to prioritize here. I'd be happy to discuss things like this openly with all of you in the Q&A session. Thank you for your attention and see you there.